Should I log off one of my...
I think it's okay.
Okay.
And I think you're live now.
Good. Okay. I'm live. Okay, I'm live. Do I go, just last question, do I go live on NFT or on my account?
You're live on all our social media channels, so
okay,
that's okay.
Okay, I can start. Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Do you hear echo or you hear well?
I hear a little bit echo. Maybe you can disconnect from Thousand Faces NFT.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Perfect. Okay. So we're live. Sorry for the delay. My name is Marlene. I'm an educator of Thousand Faces. I will, sorry about the delay. We had a bit of technical issues, but we will dive right into the presentation. So I'm sharing my screen. Perfect. View, slideshow. Everyone can see my screen. Welcome here. I'm very happy to be here with all of you. So this is the sixth short lesson of Thousand Faces, and my name is Marlene, and today we will cover how does smart contracts work. And I'm very excited for today because it's the first lesson of the year. We will bring a lot of really cool material this coming year. And we want to hear from the community what you want to learn. I will go over some of the topics that we already cover. If you want to dive deep in some of them, I can definitely cover that for you. And so yes, let's get started with education on 2023. And I will not go over all the topics. I just want to give a brief overview of what we have covered so far. We're learning about Web3, how it's working. We looked at how to create your wallets for cryptocurrency. And we learned a bit about NFTs. And I might have someone, an expert in NFTs who might come give us a talk about this. And so we will definitely dive deep into this fun topic. And at the end, we also covered blockchain. And for this lesson, I really want to, I will make a quick recap about understanding blockchain, as this will help us understand today's topic. So let's get started. We looked at blockchain. I will not give you, if you want to go into that lesson, you have access to it on the replay, but I would just want to highlight some of the characteristics of blockchain to refresh your memory, so it's fresh for today's lesson. It's distributed, it's encrypted, it's inclusive and transparent, it's historical, and it's immutable. And all of these 5 characteristics are equally important and to understand blockchain and even the topic that we will cover today. However, I do want to point out that for today's topic, the fact that blockchain is historical, meaning we keep trace of everything that's happening, and it's immutable, meaning it's traced, it cannot be changed, are 2 of very important characteristics for today's lesson. And to understand blockchain, I don't know if maybe you remember our example about the 3 friends that were going to a party, and they had to do a transaction. It was to understand how blockchain it's working, and they had to do a transaction between them. The transaction that we looked at was between Ashley and Mary to Sam. So it was we use this example to understand how the blockchain is working. And with that in mind, we had this picture which matched the dress color of the girls. And what we saw was that when the transactions from both Ashley and Marie went to Sam, it's the reason why blockchain it cannot be changed is because every transaction made, every communication made between the blocks is recorded. And it's not only recorded between one block to another, but it's recorded between all the blocks. So you cannot change, once it's recorded, you cannot change something that happened between these two blocks without getting involved with all the blockchain, as they are all linked to each other. And what this system creates, it's a very strong resistance to alteration of the system. And we know that this is protected by cryptography, and we already cover all these topics. But yeah, the most important is that the communication between the blocks is not only between one another, but between the whole ecosystem. So this is important to understand. And without further ado, let's dive into today's topic. So today we are talking about smart contracts. So before we dive into smart contracts, let's, I love giving a definition. So just a basic definition from Webster Dictionary. A contract is a binding agreement between two or more people or parties, especially it's legally enforced. If someone breaks the contract, there will be a suit, for example. There can be a business arrangement for the supply of goods, of services at a fixed price. So yes, it's that's a basic definition just of contracts if we put our mind into it. So what are contracts for? So if we know, they have a lot of different uses. In fact, some of the main ones that are properly defined are, for example, to fix a price contract. It's cost reimbursement contract, a cost plus contract, time and materials contract, unit price contract, bilateral contract, unilateral contract, or implied contract. So these are the definitions of the types of contracts that there are. And if we think in our mind, we are using contracts all the time. For example, when you register for a new education program in a university, you need to have, there's normally a code of conduct. So very often you're required to sign a contract. If you start using a service, if you hire someone and to come and help, or you start using a service either online, offline, there is an agreement between, we're talking now personal, there's an agreement between two people or parties and people, and we have something to sign. And that the point of this is to be legally covered and for everyone involved to have clear in mind what the expectation on each side is. So we use contracts for everyday life. We use contracts when you start a job. You have an agreement between the employer and the employee. And this is always to have legal support and also to know the expectations. And so we're touching a lot here about legal. So these contracts have to be, we can go back to the law and to know how to have these contracts and how they are not only engaging to people, but they are based on a society. So these are just important information to know about contracts, and we all know this. And I looked, there was statistics that were quite shocking, and not necessarily in a good way, about nowadays we receive often contracts by email or by digital contracts, and often people are not reading these contracts. That's why I touched about the legal, because the more complex the contract is, there has to be a legal team behind it for the lingo, to make sure that everything is respected. And often we don't have the language and the capacity to fully understand, or we can say a bit lazy. People don't often read contracts and they sign them. And the statistics of contracts that were signed without being read, it was a bit horrific. So be aware of that. Anyway, as I said, there's a lot of things about contracts. And so I want to ask you all a question and something to think about, talking about the different types of contracts and how we use them in everyday life. Do you think all contracts are written, traced, and unchangeable? It's a question, food for thought. So you can think about that. And for now, what I want to talk about is we often know that this is not the case. As we see, just to point here, an image of two people talking with each other, and maybe they have a contract, they're talking about the contract, and there's not necessarily a trace around it, right? So often we see this in businesses, that often, even if there's a written contract between parties or between the parts of the business with the customers, there was a verbal contract, so it's not always written. There was a verbal contract that was done in the past between two different people or two different parties that it actually sometimes is more powerful than the written or legal one. And of course, the nuances and the legal behind all of this is very complex. And but yeah, it's the what I want to point out here is that the contracts are often, if they're verbal and there's no one recording, they can have a contract, and it still can be valid if it's an agreement between two people. And you have to depend on the context whether this can be applied to law or not. Sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. But the proof of the contract itself is very hard to find. So the proof we cannot trace it back, even though it has a lot of power. And this is because yes, so the complexity of all of this is us as human, and dealing with a complex system of society, and it's a constant back and forth between human and society and legal. And of course, this for legal, this creates absolutely a lot of problems when you have agreements, and it's not often they're not often traceable. If we think back in the day, maybe you had a paper. The only proof of a contract was a paper. If a house burned down, or if someone burned down the paper, is the contract still valid? So it brings up a lot of questions about the validity of the contract. If the contract could be someone can forge it or can make a photocopy and change. So it can be changed, and especially when technology started catching up with maybe a piece of contract written by a computer, we humans got very smart, and maybe with a computer program you can edit, do a bit of Photoshop, and change a contract. So yes, it's of course this is ethical and moral dilemma, but often even if it's human behavior, and there's always again between the capacity of the human with technology, right, to see to outsmart one of the other. But yeah, so just to point out that the changeable traceability and even the written trace of a contract is not always there, even though a contract might be valid between two parties. So this is where Web3 is coming in, Web3 and blockchain technology. And we can talk about the technology and the storage. So this is bringing us a capacity nowadays with Web3 and blockchain to keep trace, and the capacity to trace back these contracts. It will no longer have this, it will reduce the amount of uncertainty with contracts, especially as nowadays we're working more on digital. This is where more of our life is happening. So with this blockchain and Web3, we are arriving at a place where we can have capacity to trace back and store with less risk of losing. Okay, so we're talking about smart contracts. The first time that someone used this term, it was in 1997 by Nick Szabo. Some of you might recognize his name. He is involved in the beginning and creation of Bitcoin, but he used this term way before Bitcoin was created. He's a computer scientist, cryptographer, and many other things. But yeah, he was the first one who used this term. And in fact, at that moment when he started using this term, what he wanted to create or build was a distributed ledger to store contracts. So he was not necessarily in the process of making contract. It was like a storage of the contracts, and he used the term smart contracts. So let's dive a bit deeper between a regular contract. As you see, back in the day, this already has it's already done by computers, but before they were done by hand. Between this person who has a paper contract, often nowadays still for employment, for many things, this is how we're signing contracts. And this is an image to represent smart contracts. So we have a few things here. It's no longer paper. And as you see here, there's something, it's blocked, it's linked to something else, it's not alone. And it's secure with a lock here. So it has a few characteristics that are different from a contract. But basically, in fact, if we go back to the basics of it, a smart contract is just a contract. It's just like a real world contract. And the main difference is that it's purely digital. So this is actually, when you think, you don't have to think about something completely different. A smart contract, it's in fact like a real contract. It's just purely digital, and it has some characteristics that help it too, but the main difference is that it's purely digital. And to go into the definition more of smart contract, it's a smart contract, it's basically a tiny computer that is stored in a blockchain. So this is, we come back to our blockchain here image, and we can see here how a smart contract that is digital, it's going into a blockchain. So I will give a brief example of how a smart contract is being created. So we use today the use case of crowdfunding. Some of you might know one of the most famous crowdfunding, Kickstarter. And to understand how this process works, I will give you a quick example. We go back to our 3 friends. So they enjoyed the party. They met a lot of people, and our friend here, Sam, she wants to start a project. She's really excited about this project, and she's talking to her friends about it, and she knows that she needs to raise funds. She has the idea, she has maybe started things, and she knows she needs to raise funds. So she opts to go to a crowdfunding platform such as Kickstarter. And how most of you might be familiar how this works, but I will just say it. How this works is that if she wants to raise funds, she will set a target goal of how much funds she might need. So she does her calculation, her business plan model, and she will set a target goal of how much money she wants to raise. And so she talks to her friends, Ashley and Marine, and they listen very enthusiastically. They support her and believe her project, and they know that she has a good business saved. So they actually do want to. They think it's interesting and a good idea to invest in her project, and they're very happy to even provide some funding for her. So how it's working is that Sam will create a goal for funding. And for now, her 2 friends, Ashley and Marie, will be contributing to this fund. So we have Ashley and Marie on this side, and we have Sam. She has created her goal. how much she wants to fund. And we have here in between the friends a third party called Kickstarter. So what they do is that the friends are depositing the fund of however much they want to give to the Kickstarter, and this collects the fund, and so we have a deadline of how much time. By how much time do we want this goal? So it's just to set up a deadline to not only how much, but by when. In the meantime, Sam does a bit of networking, collects from other places, and one of two scenarios can happen. The first one is that there is no, Sam doesn't reach her fund goal. So she was targeting to have 1 million and she raised 750. So at this moment, the goal was not achieved. So what happens is that Kickstarter sends the money back to the friends, since the goal was not reached. That's the negative scenario. In a positive scenario, Sam worked so hard on networking that Ashley and Marie's contribution plus all the networking she did, she reached the goal. So what happens here? If the goal is reached, the funds get transferred to Sam. So this is a typical scenario. And how are smart contracts in the role here? So in this case, when we will have a smart contract, we remove the third party of the middle between them two, and we put the smart contract. And what happens is that, just as the transaction example, Marie and Ashley will send the fund from their wallet into using the smart contract about reaching the goal, by when, all of this is there, and they send their funding, and it's stored in the blockchain. So everything's traced. And as again, one of the two scenarios can happen. If the scenario where the goal is not reached, everything is traced by the smart contract. So, and all the funds are stored in the blockchain. So without being able to change something, the funds will just go back to the friends. In the positive scenario where the goal is reached and the fund will go back to Sam, none of the funding is lost, and everything as is written in the smart contract and cannot be altered will go back to Sam. So we remove, by using blockchain, we remove the third party in the middle, and we make everything very secure with all the characteristics we've talked about the blockchain. And all of this is written in a smart contract that cannot be altered by any of the parties. So that's what makes smart contracts more safe. I will be wrapping up soon because we're reaching the 20 minutes. So some of the characteristics of smart contracts, it's that they're very secure. They are trustless because they're fully trust, and they're autonomous, and they're cost effective because there's no third party handling everything. It is the execution of the contract. It's happening through the blockchain. So it's all digital. So it's kind of very exciting. We will go just to wrap up. So this is more the characteristic of smart contracts. And next week we will go to another. I will touch a bit more of how the smart contracts are working, and we will touch upon another topic for blockchain and how the smart contracts are working in the blockchain. So I hope you enjoyed the lesson for today. Sorry about the delay, and keep learning. Very excited to be here with you. Bye-bye, everyone. Have a nice morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you're in the world. Thank you so much.